Welcome to the Retrospect podcast, a show where people come together from different walks of life and discuss a topic from their generation's perspective. My name is Ian, and as always, I'm joined by Jason.
Hello, everyone.
And Stoney.
Hello.
And we have a very special guest today, so
yes, we do.
Throw it to Stoney again.
This is what's turning out to be a very good friend of mine, somebody that I've enjoyed a number of great conversations and some fascinating, thought-provoking conversations. This is Mr. Troy, and I met Mr. Troy when the doctors are trying to figure out ways to help me and my brain damage and my balance, and a hyperbaric chamber came about. And they had a partnership with Troy and his business, and I met Troy through that, and it just got extremely fascinating. And Mr. Troy,
Yep. Okay.
Welcome to the show.
Introduce yourself.
And, yes.
And you're actually a listener. You've listened to a couple of them, and we just thought this would be something good. We're going to be talking about wellness and peace today.
And I appreciate you inviting me on today.
Oh, yeah. I just want to take our conversation to a worldwide level. How about that?
That's scary.
That's what I like to hear.
That's right. How did you get involved originally in wellness and fitness or peace or however you want to go with that?
Yep. Well, my family has always been pretty active. So we grew up, my dad was always a coach. And so I was always around activity. Whether it be baseball or just some type of sports, track. Mostly my father was a baseball coach, and just inspiring. He was driven, passion, teaching. He was a great teacher, I thought, as a child, and he always was out to help, whomever he was in front of. So that inspired me just to continue with that wellness journey or just that fitness journey. I grew up, I thought it was pretty normal. Like, this is what you do. You're always playing sports, or you're always active, you're always outside, so that is kind of what drove us to, kind of live that lifestyle.
And for the record, being this a generational show, the activity part, you are Gen X, right?
Correct.
Okay.
No. Yes. 1969.
1969.
He's me.
Gen X.
There you go.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the kids today don't do that.
Oh, yeah.
No.
There's no activity. There's no outside. There's nothing. It's computer, TV, phone.
Yeah. So, it's funny you say that. Growing up, and before I get a little bit more into how I ended up here, growing up, our computer and TV was waking up in the morning, doing chores, and then you couldn't leave the house until you finished your chores. And the first thing that we had a neighborhood pool, and this pool was it was a great neighborhood where all the kids ended up.
Okay.
And so almost think of it as your social media today. So if you want to know what your friends are doing, you go get on some social media app. Well, back then, if you wanted to know what your friends are doing, you were on your bike at 10 o'clock and you were waiting in line to get at the pool.
Okay.
Because that's where everybody was, and from there, that was the entire day. So the pool closed at 12. They ran you out of the pool area. They reopened at 2. Everybody was waiting at the door at 2 o'clock. And then you had to be on by the time the lights came on, and the street lights. And that meant it was dinner time, and then you gathered around the dinner table and you just shared stories, or you just, I don't know, it's something that you just kind of took advantage of. That was the way of life. And that was, you never want to let go of those things.
Right.
Those are things that are like almost what I see now is like kind of the past. I don't see a whole lot of that anymore, due to social media and due to just both parents working, everybody coming home at different times. I mean, it's not often that you come across a lot of families that are actually having dinner time together anymore.
Or if you do see them sitting at dinner at a restaurant, all 4 or 5 of them are on their phones.
Yeah.
That's sad to me.
Yeah. So there's a pretty major disconnect right now between, grounding as a family and what we're up against. So, and I think a lot of that has to deal with where we are as a state of the country. You know, the health industry continues to grow, and you know, you're starting to hear a lot more about wellness and mindfulness. You didn't hear a lot of that back in the day.
Right.
You know, it was mostly, you know, our generation, we're focusing on wellness, and then, you know, the mindfulness comes after that. You know, that's just kind of how we grew up.
Okay.
So so that's kind of where my journey started, and then you just kind of follow the path. So, you know, I ended up in the health club industry, you know, working a front desk at a high school, and then from there, you know, end up in the early 90s. I got an opportunity to do a joint venture with a friend. We opened a health club. Over time, we opened a lot of health clubs, and then today it got me here. Just as I continue to get older, you still, you know, you're curious of what helps you tick, and so the wellness industry post-COVID really became a real thing, because everybody started scratching their head on where this is going, you know, so you start to investigate more on your own. And that's really what drove me to the wellness industry.
Now, your business had a number of technologies in there. Had the IVs. It had the hyperbaric chamber, which is what I was doing for 6 weeks, 4 days a week. You have the cryo chamber, but you also have something, the LED red light. What were some of the other things that I don't either remember or didn't see?
Well, you the PEMF, which is pulsating electromagnetic frequency,
the Tesla coil.
Yeah. And, well, that is the biocharger.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So those are two other things that you didn't get to see much, but you know, in a nutshell, the thing that you mentioned, and the only other thing that you didn't mention, was the hot therapy, which is like saunas.
Yes.
So,
and then the hot and cold.
The contrast therapy.
Contrast therapy.
Yeah.
Right. So you let me try the cryo, and I rather enjoyed that.
I've done that before.
That was the baby one is a negative 140 for 3 minutes. I think the max you can do is what, 3 minutes and 30 seconds.
Yeah. I wouldn't call it a baby, but it was.
Well, what is the science or the medicine behind what that does? Because that made me feel good.
Yeah.
It didn't. It doesn't do anything to my brain or memory or anything, but my body is sore all the time now.
Right.
But that made me feel really good for about 5 to 6 hours. What happened to me when I went in that?
All sorts of stuff happened. You know, the body is like a pharmacy. You know, that we don't actually get a chance to activate. We've gotten so comfortable, you know, as as technologies continues to roll out, and things that we like to do is like, you know, everything that we bring in is like a shortcut to something else. You know, before we used to push the lawnmower, you know, then we drove the lawnmower, you know, and
now they have robot.
Right. Now they have, now you don't even have to get on the lawnmower.
Yeah, you don't have to get on it anymore.
You know, so think of every industry as just making things get simpler over time. And basically what happened is we kind of got soft, you know,
you need to push the lawnmower.
You got to push the lawnmower, you know, and that's what cryotherapy does. It's like pushing a lawnmower, you know.
Okay.
What it does is, and I'm glad you said that, because, you know, we don't do enough of that. And I'll say I still have a push lawnmower.
There you go.
You know, because I just feel like that from what I know.
I do too.
Yeah. And you're in great shape. So this explains a lot. So, you know, the cryotherapy, it does a lot of things. So number one, you know, just think of adversity. Okay. So any type of adversity is going to be something that is going to be, you don't think it is, but it's super positive for you. You know, there's a lot of things that happen under adversity.
Well, you can't improve without change.
Exactly. So
you got to get out your comfort zone, number one.
Think about that on what you just said, like on a cellular level. So basically your body is constantly replacing cells. Okay. So, you know, there's only a few things like the nervous system and the brain that there are still cells in your body that you're a child, basically. every cell in your body has been replaced multiple times. You don't even have the same body as you did when you were a child. So think of that, how that is constantly reproducing. So when you put your body under stress, like cold therapy, it triggers everything in your body to start to make it like your armor, if you will. So the things that happen is it really tests your nervous system. Okay, so when you test your nervous system, over time, when you're testing your nervous system under that type of temperature, things just to get a little bit easier. Stress gets easier, your mood gets better. You learn how to handle stress, because that is what we call a controlled stress, type of
now that stress, would that be part of like the first 50 some odd seconds where your body goes into some fight or flight situation?
Yeah. Okay. So the first 45 seconds, your brain's really just trying to figure it out. And from there, once your body triggers, it's about 45 seconds in, some longer, depending on, your age or your shape that you're in. And what's going to happen is you're going to trigger a fight or flight, which means your adrenaline's going to start to increase. So you're going to do two things. You're either going to fight through this, or you're going to flight out the door. Okay. And which we do. We have some people that, they're mentally not ready for it. So they do walk out at that point. And everybody that goes in does hit the fight or flight. And so after the fight or flight, you're going to, obviously your adrenaline's going to increase. You're going to pump in a lot of dopamine. Your inflammation, the reason you feel better is your inflammation is going to be on the ground. So, it's almost like putting you in a nice chiller for a little while, like a piece of meat. And then you're going to basically, inflammation is going to be non-existent at that point, at least for a little while.
Okay.
So the dopamine is going to keep you nice and high and mighty for the next 2 to 3 hours.
Wow.
So...
And I think I remember you saying something about it starts to pull the blood from the extremities a little bit. And so one of the other organs starts to filter it and does some stuff to it too. What is it? I mean, what is it doing to the body? I mean, what is your body saying at that point? What is it doing? What is it trying to accomplish?
I think, from what I've read, your body's a lot smarter than you think. So when you're under stress or adversity, your body's going to go into gear because it wants to save you. It really does. It's trying to do everything to keep you alive. So at that point, most of your blood is going to rush to your core. So your blood vessels on your limbs are going to start to kind of close up. You're going to have a flux of oxygen to your core and your brain. And most of everything's going to be sitting in your core at that point, or the majority of your blood, which then triggers the liver. The liver pushes out what they call a cold shock protein. So think of that pharmacy kind of kicking into gear. Okay, so the cold shock protein, basically it just helps with your hormones. So it scours the blood and kind of starts to clean it up at that point. You do have a lot of damaged and dead blood cells. This is the first thing that it's going to start to take care of, is the bad stuff. Okay. So that's the good thing about the liver and the cold shock protein.
Wow.
So a lot going on in the cold therapy, so you don't just have to be injured. We had quite a few customers that would come in on the cryotherapy that were just fighting either anxiety or depression, because think about when you're in depression, it's hard to trigger those things. It's hard to trigger the endorphins. It's hard to trigger just all the happy juice that you need to get through the day.
Okay. Wow.
I work pretty closely with a natural birth clinic, and that's something they say a lot is, you'd be surprised at what your body can do, especially like the female body, which was like, there's a lot of things, processes in place that, are happen very naturally, that whenever there's no medication involved,
right.
The recovery time is so fewer than as opposed to being in a hospital and being underneath a whole bunch of drugs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So they have I've talked to a lot of women that were like, well, I mean, wasn't that bad? And I was like, that's not what I've heard throughout
well,
the history.
think about it.
What
were we doing before Western medicine?
I know. And that's what I obviously would like talking with them, and they're all midwives and
Well,
professionals in their field.
I
There's a
mean-
lot of misconceptions in that field about,
I read I listened to a podcast regarding early medicine, and in the 19th century, there were two schools of medicine. There were, medicines that dealt with surgeries and
Right.
drugs, and then there was more of a natural.
Mm-hmm.
And then all
I
of a
think
sudden,
there's a nice balance of both. Like I think there is
Well-
a time where surgeries, intervention, medication, and drugs like antibiotics and certain things are very critical. But I don't want to throw out all
right,
the
that's what I'm saying. At
natural-
one time in the United States, there was really
Yeah,
two established ways of treating people, and unfortunately, when the American Medical Association was formed, I believe in the mid 1800s, one of its founding charters was to basically make medicine lucrative
Right.
enough.
Yeah.
So
Well, then it wasn't until J.D. Rockefeller and the petroleum industry, and now 90% of the drugs out there are all petroleum
well, that's
based.
what's happened. So by the time you get to the 20th century, the amount of medical schools that cater to this other form of
Right.
homeopathic, I guess that's the term they use, of healing, really kind of got frowned on. It got it. Anybody that practiced it was sued into oblivion by the AMA. It's very interesting how all that kind of worked out over time. But there's a lot of things to think about when it comes to how we heal our bodies.
Well, this sounds more like even though it's kind of a really cold situation, it sounds more of a natural way to do this, because you're allowing your body to adjust and reposition itself to heal itself.
Exactly.
Yeah, what exactly? So, what are some of the tools now? I mean, we talk about cryo. What are some of tools that are used now?
Well, the hyperbaric chamber
Hyperbaric is I've got a family member that have had to go into hyperbaric chambers because of injuries from football to the brain. But we've talked about hyperbaric, cryo. What other things that are out there that are being looked at as possible, new technologies to push the healing umbrella, so to speak?
Yeah. But there's a lot now coming to there's a lot more studies being pushed in this direction now, just because of the success rate of the studies. But I would have to say, three of them that would be at the top of my head would be some type of cold therapy, some type of hot therapy. That would be sauna. There's tons of studies coming out of other countries now, 30-year studies that are just showing the benefits of the hot therapy and the combination of the two. And then there's red light therapy, anything that's going to penetrate the skin, that's going to get the cell excited. Red light, gets that mitochondria all hyped up. When the mitochondria is hyped up, everything goes to work, So think of your body. I mean, we're literally, the average person has about 30-something trillion cells, so think about that for a second. How many, what we're really made of, the cells are the key to a lot of things. So if we can keep the cell happy and excited, and if we can keep it healthy, then we're less likely to fall victim of other things that come down the pipeline. Whether it be something that's man-made or just some common cold. So
we I know that y'all had these large stand-up red light. What would you call that?
Well, it's just a red light panels.
Red panel. That's sort of a big red light panel.
Yeah.
Miranda and I'm a plug my buddies at Black Friday Deals. We found a couple of red light pads, and Miranda had gotten bit by 6 or 7 red ants, and it caused her ankle to get very red, inflamed, and swollen. And we put one of those red light panels on it every night for about 3 nights. The redness went away, The swelling went away because it brings oxygen. It oxygenates. It brings circulation to the area.
How long did you apply the red light therapy?
It was about 10 to 15 minutes each time because it shuts off automatically, so that you don't just keep it going. You push the button and then the timer, it goes off, and it really helped her. Mm-hmm. It took the itching away. Now it would come back, and then you did it again, and then after a couple of days, poof, it was gone. Right. And it was better than putting chemicals on. It was better than putting this stuff on it. It actually helped her. Mm-hmm. It was fascinating just to watch because I remember seeing that stuff at your shop, mm-hmm. and then being able to apply it just kind of in a goofy. These pads are $1,000.
Oh, gosh.
Wow.
These pads are $1,000, and we found them. My Black Friday deal buddies. We found them for a really good deal, but and it's just fascinating technology because I had never seen it work. I remember standing in front of your and you can't feel the heat from the pad, from the panel,
from the light, right?
But I just had it on Ian, and all of a sudden you could tell his arm was starting to get warm because it's what the cell is doing, right? Can you go into a little bit about that?
Of course, and it's red lights, so it's not a heating pad, so you won't feel heat from that. But what happens is the light penetrates the skin a couple of inches. Think about, you remember when you were a kid and you used to put that flashlight up against your hand, you could see the light kind of come through on the other side. Well, that's what red light does inside the body. So it's penetrating all those cells. So what happens is that it creates energy, which is ATP, okay? And energy, once you create the energy in the cell, what it starts to do is it starts to detox carbon dioxide, and it starts to bring in oxygen. So think of your body as a machine, basically, a refinery, So, you're having to keep these things oiled. You're having to keep them cleaned. You want to make sure the pipes are clean. Everything's detoxed, and you're constantly putting good materials in the body. Okay. So sun is good material. Red light is a great material to recharge the body. Oxygen, the hyperbaric chamber, is great material. Food, that could be a whole nother episode that we talk about.
Absolutely.
Food. But, food can be a good material. You just have to be really selective on what you're choosing and how you're choosing it and when you're choosing it.
And see, I think that's part of the problem now is because 50 to 75 years ago, bread had 3 ingredients.
Right.
Now it has 39 ingredients, and 33 of them are petroleum-based. Mm-hmm. You can't even pronounce the ingredients. Why can't we go back to and start putting good stuff in our bodies?
Right. I think it comes down to, money.
And convenience.
I think,
you got to eat good bread. We got some good breads out there.
Sure, but is that part of the what is the big thing right now?
I eat Ezekiel bread. That's what I eat. It's all my bread is frozen.
Gluten. What is it? Gluten-free stuff. Gluten-free stuff. Well, if you take out all those chemicals, how much gluten's in that bread now? There is none. It's all the chemicals. Mm-hmm. It's the process that they use to make the bread. So we really need to go back to a homeopathic way and doing things a little bit more naturally. And all this stuff is really just natural. The red light panels is just taking the sun and concentrating it on you.
Right.
Is there any new technologies beyond what you just mentioned? Red light, cryo, hyperbaric. Is there anything else we're possibly on the horizon that?
Oh, can I please lead you a little bit on this one? Mm-hmm. My favorite one, the Tesla coil. Because we've talked about Nikola Tesla on this show, and there is you want to
biocharger
that uses gases and tubes that react to the different frequencies, and that thing is neat. Yep. Please go into that one.
Yeah, well,
because it's not a new technology, but it's a new use of a Nikola Tesla technology.
Right, and these things that we're talking about are not new. These things have been around for a long time, but just got pushed aside and and kind of made fun of for a long time.
Right.
And so that kind of killed that industry, and then Western medicine took over and
couldn't get the AMA seal of approval.
Right.
That's right.
That's why.
Right. And people want convenience. They want to be ready. They want to be well now. with the littlest work as possible. And so that's kind of what's gotten us here. But the biocharger, it works off of frequencies, energy, pulsating electromagnetic energy. It works off of different, like you were saying earlier, gases. And what those gases do is they create different types of lights. So think of remember, we're full of cells. Cells are full of energy, and the biocharger helps regulate or align that energy. It basically pushes good energy into us. And so that's depending on the formula or the recipe that you're looking for. It can help basically just kind of align the cells, get the cells charged, get them from not being so sticky.
We've talked about frequencies here on the show before. How specific can you said something about recipes.
Yep.
What are the recipes, and what can you target, and if somebody just wanted to do, hey, I want to come in and just be in a happy mood.
Yeah.
Can you target that?
It's funny you say that. There's a recipe called Happy Mood. There is one.
There we go. There you go. How about that?
There you go.
Tons of things. Inflammation, mood change. A lot of it's about mood,
Okay.
and because we need that more often now than ever. But just anything that you're trying to target, whether it be skin acne, hair, also there's probably about 100 different recipes that you can go through.
So you can target things, because we've talked about on the show using healing frequencies, meditation frequencies, calming frequencies.
I think they called it the God frequency.
The God frequencies, just different frequencies. So you can actually tune it into that, and using the frequency on the coil and then the gases, and go for something very specific. How long would somebody generally sit or lay? Or
12 to 15 minutes.
Okay.
On something like that.
How close do you have to be to that machine for it to kind of work?
Within 6 feet, you need to be in close to something like that.
Now, let's say somebody has a pacemaker or something like that. Would any of that affect that?
Any type of electronics like the pacemaker would probably affect that. There are some contraindications, that we run through with the clients and to make sure that it would work for them. So,
wow.
Well, that's encouraging.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what's coming on probably the next thing.
I think if you start looking at, in Google, they target you on whatever you're looking for. But if you start looking at frequencies, you'll find that there's a lot more information
out
there.
There is a lot of information on frequencies.
Well, when I had the brain surgery, I was listening to very specific frequencies and music and things like that for healing, and it did work. I've tried it a little bit here. I don't know how much it works as far as the listening to it or on your body, because now that I'm deaf, I can't hear like I could before. So I don't know if it would have the same impact with the headphones and everything else on. But
I don't think it has a whole lot to do with hearing. I definitely think that's part of it, but it's a vibration, and it's the vibration that is the tool, So, and I was thinking about, you had a young man on, I don't know if he was a young man or not, but you had a gentleman on by the name of Brandon, and you guys were doing an episode on understanding the attack of the mind.
Right.
And that was pretty interesting, because I think that kind of taps into the same, when it comes to frequency, it kind of taps into, what he was talking about.
Yeah.
It's all based on frequency.
It's good and bad.
Yeah.
I mean, the human body is basically an antenna.
That's it.
So
Yeah.
we're very susceptible to.
Well, the universe is a frequency.
Yep.
Everything is based on frequency. So,
Well,
I learned that from a kind of I don't want to say out there, but people kind of look down on her. She's a religious person that was also very intelligent scientifically, and so people had stuff to say about her. But I learned from her specifically that she's like, at the very core of it all, everything is vibration. Everything is sound. You are sound down to your. Everything has and in music terms, everything has like a resonance with itself. So like if you play a note or you play a sound, sometimes things around you will kind of vibrate, and you'll hear that. That's that sympathetic frequency. You can hit a note or play a note loud enough next to a guitar, and the corresponding strings will start to vibrate, and it's that same sort of thing. Is that everything down to its core is all vibrations and sounds, and,
Well,
and of course, as
frequency
a religious person, she brought that further down to like God spoke you into existence, and so the very sound of Him speaking you into existence is the fact that you are that, like, even down to the cellular level, you are
Agree.
So that kind of stuff was really interesting.
Well,
yeah, there's a lot more studies being done now on these frequencies that you're talking about are dialed in on movies and music and everything.
It affects moods and
Yeah.
I think we talked about that on the. I remember reading a lot about
what's
that
the
stuff.
old saying? It needs to be taught and trained in the police academies and regularly in the police forces today, that when somebody's listening to AC/DC, the speed limit goes up 10 miles an hour. I mean, that's just
it's
automatic.
true. It makes you feel differently.
It does. It makes you feel differently. And so if somebody says, I was listening to this type of a music, that you say, okay.
I'd be very curious if they would actually do a study on citations and being stopped.
Probably.
If somehow you could bring in, what music were you listening to? Just to see if there's a correlation there.
Here first on the Retrospect podcast, can we get a study done on the
I guess
correlation
the
of
National
National
Highway
Institute? You don't have to even have to be.
NHTSA would have to do something like that.
You don't even have to be specific towards like vehicles and stuff. I mean, like, you listen to any music that has higher tempo,
right?
Or more.
Well,
calm
what
tempo,
about the studies with the different music next to plants?
Right.
Mm-hmm. When you play death metal, the plant actually grows away from the music. But if you play jazz or some classical music, it grows toward the music, the speaker. So there's evidence of it already. It's there. It's just I don't know if people want to hear it yet or not.
Well, I tell you what, I'm looking at some stats here.
No,
not me. But just some consumer stats on the wellness economy.
Okay. Oh, wow. Here we go.
The United States has a 1.8 trillion wellness economy. The world, as of 2022, I'm looking at these stats, is 5.6 trillion. So there's a lot of money in this industry.
Mm-hmm.
Tons.
Well, it doesn't help, too, that I think a lot of time, I think we're moving into an age where holistic and natural remedies and that kind of stuff is becoming more of a popular method that people, I think, are kind of moving towards, at least in my age demographic and younger. But with that also comes a lot of scams and snake oil pills and, all that kind of stuff, where it gets, because a lot of it's unregulated, quote unquote, it kind of can become a scary place where you got to really do your own research. At least from what I've experienced, there are some natural remedies and things that I do, but you can very quickly get into like some very.
No, I think I agree. I think as the world has gotten smaller, I think people are looking again. I think we're kind of going back a little bit to medicinal and plants and using kind of some of the what I would call the natural world to attack diseases, or injuries, or whatever the case may be. So, here it is, says the Gallup National Health and Well-Being Index found 52.1% of Americans in 2023 considered themselves thriving.
Wow.
Okay.
But that's down from 21 and 22.
Uh-oh.
So it's not actually going up, it's going down.
Well, everything works on a pendulum. We've talked about that, and early on in my generation, people ate healthy. You cooked food. You didn't have all this fast food. You didn't have all this.
It's the preservatives.
It's the preservatives
that people are eating now.
And
that
it's
are
the chemicals and everything that goes in it. And I'm encouraged with Ian's comment about that. His generation and after are going more toward a more holistic, natural way to do things, And one thing I was reading the other day, it was a goofy article about more people are making bread at home.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love homemade bread.
Oh, what?
Speaking of, there's a person that I know personally that makes her own sourdough.
Really?
at home.
Mm-hmm. Well, see, my
Makes-
mom did
makes
that.
the makes the
Yes.
best cinnamon rolls.
Did you
So
know
good.
sourdough kind of comes from the early pioneer days? And this is just a crazy fact because you needed things that had multiple purposes. Okay, the sourdough starter could be used to make bread, pancakes, and biscuits, but it also could be used to make glue to seal up the little log cabins and stuff. It was a multi-purpose thing. So that was kind of neat.
Interesting.
My mom did great stuff with sourdough.
Yeah.
There's nothing like a good sourdough biscuit or pancake. Oh, it's so good, but it's natural.
Yeah.
It's completely natural, and that's why I liked it. And I wish I could get a starter from my mom, but I don't think she does that anymore. So it's something like just
From what I understand, the sourdough is probably one of the better breads for
yes,
you. You know,
health wise, I think it
Yeah.
is too.
There's a lot of stuff going on in there.
right,
Natural stuff,
right.
and it's tasty, which I wouldn't know right now because I got no sense of smell or taste. But
The same thing can be said about there's a history in my family with like digestive stuff, and so like I don't think I have anything currently that is affecting that, but I have taken precautions, and like there are certain things that I do to watch out for my gut health, more so than I would have in my earlier years, because again I know that, like I said, there's a potential for some underlying things there from hereditary stuff. So, but yeah.
I think the more studies that come out, like probably now as we're finding out there are some things that are hereditary,
Right.
and there are some things that we can just not do what our parents did,
Right.
right, and not do what their parents did.
Preventative stuff. Yeah.
And so I think more of those studies that continue to come out, that we're not so bound to that it's hereditary. You just have to try to figure out how to live your best lifestyle.
Right.
So
that you can afford.
right,
Mhm.
right, exactly. And that might just mean you might have to start a little garden in the backyard, and that's going to also help, I think, mentally and physically. Those things. Although you might not be producing enough fruits and vegetables out of your backyard, I think that there's a lot of benefits with having your own little garden in the back.
I'm glad you kind of said that because I was listening to Hottie Dr. Miranda talking to somebody the other day about a lot of these things that are happening with people medically. They're finding that a large proportion of them are vitamin D deficient. Mm-hmm. And how do you get vitamin D?
Sunlight.
That's the common misconception, is that it's just sunlight. But it's not. You can go stand out in the sun for 4 hours and not get any vitamin D. The way she was explaining it, and gosh, I wish she was here right now, was that you need the sun, but you need the sweat, and you need this whole process on a longer period of time. And remember, we're not out in the sun. We're not active in the sun. We're not sweating. We're not doing these things anymore. And so many people are now vitamin D deficient because it's the process of the sweat and the dirt and the things and the sunlight together that produces the vitamin D in the body. Mm-hmm. And so it's not just the sunlight,
Right.
but it's all of it. And so
Right.
if we're not active out in the sun, we're not going to get enough.
Yeah. And if you're not active out in the sun, there's a good chance you're probably not sweating.
No.
That's kind of my point there. Yeah,
Yeah.
You could
We've
go out.
we've gotten very complacent.
Yes.
Like I said earlier, I think as a generation, we've gotten softer.
Mm-hmm.
We like to be comfortable. So I think the key is, just how do you get yourself out of your comfort zone, and how do you stick with it? Because you talked earlier, the main thing is you can do this once or twice. You can put that red light panel on your arm, and you can feel better. But it's what I've seen over my 30-something years of just being in the fitness and the wellness industry is the best results actually come from consistency. So I always go back to this was years ago, and I was my dentist, who I'm good friends with. I'm like, this flossing thing's a real pain in the what. I'm like, Is there any other way? He's like, well, I don't know. How many teeth you want to keep? I'm like, well, I'd like to keep all of them. He's like, okay, you got to floss. I'm like, okay, well, I'll get it then. And I'll start flossing. So think of all these things that we're talking about, and you don't necessarily have to have a hyperbaric chamber or a red light panel.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to get yourself under a little adversity. And that might just be, just like Jason was saying earlier, just mowing the lawn, catching a sweat.
Mm-hmm.
Doing something that's uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
and today, that's a lot of things are uncomfortable, so I think just, finding your thing that you're uncomfortable with and making a commitment to yourself and just being consistent. And I think those things don't cost you much money, but I think if you can at least do that and start to rewire the brain and not get so soft on yourself, I think you'll have the best results.
I've heard from a couple of medical professionals about just low intensity, physical activity is what I think a lot of people lack in their day-to-day life. And so it's just walking that little bit extra, doing that, like you're saying, something resistance based, or something that you have to just to kind of go that extra little bit. For me, I every chance I get to in a parking lot, I'll deliberately park probably halfway out or more even, just to get those few extra steps in. So it's
use the stairs, don't take the elevator.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's just something that's low intensity stuff. I'm not, I may not be doing a full workout, but something that can keep myself moving physically.
I think you have to kind of, and it's true. I think it varies around the country. That's why if you look at health statistics around the United States, for example, generally what you're going to find are the healthier states are going to be probably out west.
Mm-hmm.
And generally because the climate kind of produces a desire to be outside.
Right.
And to really engage in nature. And then people are doing more strenuous activity. They're out running, they're walking, they're playing sports or whatever the case may be. In climates that are where we're at, it gets hard.
Yeah.
To really want to be outside.
Oh yeah,
to do things.
Especially because we've had a heat advisory for the past week.
Exactly, and we're going to probably have a lot of them.
I recently have a close friend of mine that just went to the hospital because of heat exhaustion. Wasn't keeping himself properly hydrated, and of course was outside for a long time.
You have to kind of prepare yourself for your environment. If you're going to be in a hot environment, you need to take certain precautions. Now, even you can take precautions, there is a point where it gets dangerous to be outside in heat.
Right.
You can do the same thing in cold.
Of course, yeah.
That's
where I get
people who live in brutally cold climates.
Yeah.
I look at the news and you watch. Well, it's going to be 50 or 60 below zero, and I'm like, I've talked to people who live in that and you can't go outside very long, otherwise you got instant frostbite. On your skin. So it's once again a little common sense has got to kick in, and whatever your environment is also plays a lot in the choices that we make to try to keep ourselves healthy. So, and unfortunately, we live in an area where people like to cook.
Oh, yeah.
People like to drink. And oftentimes, what we drink and what we eat is not very healthy.
Right.
It just isn't. We eat a lot of fried foods.
Alcohol and sodium.
A lot of salt, a lot of sugar.
Yeah.
So it's, sometimes we bring things on ourselves.
Right.
And it's hard to kind of live in a culture that celebrates that, and that's good. There's nothing wrong with it, but at the same time, moderate it a little bit.
Yeah. And I think that's with this person in particular, which, by the way, he's totally fine, was able to make a recovery, but definitely it was a very scary situation for him because he had to go to the hospital and was passing out and all that kind of stuff. Because, again, I think he was working underneath his normal conditions mentally. He wasn't overexerting himself, but the environment around him was obviously super humid and hot and got the best of him. And he was like, I didn't think it was that big of a deal until it was. And I was like,
I'm going to tell you, last Friday I went out and ran. It was 9 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, and
I'm going to tell you what, I ran 5 miles, and I'm going to tell you, that was brutal. I mean, I was like, I've got to get out here at 6:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
to be able to do this, because it's just, I mean, it was tough.
I bet.
I'm not gonna lie to you, but yeah, I mean,
It's crazy.
how we try to keep ourselves in shape.
But and like you said, the like the opposite for me. Like I really enjoy when it gets cooler outside and I get super active, and I love that. And there was a couple of times when I was up in Canada that I, it got far too cold, and I got myself into a predicament where I was like, I'm stuck out here in the cold, and I had that fight or flight situation where like I was like, I got to get out of here, and my body was reacting in a way I was not expecting. Where I was like,
right. I've dealt with heat,
so.
a heat related issue when I was younger. I was at a job working outside in construction.
Oh gosh!
And I'm gonna tell you, that ain't fun.
Mm-mm.
That feeling when it hits you,
Yeah,
it's scary.
Yeah, well, basically under heat, especially this time of year, because right now we're hitting peak temperatures.
Mm-hmm.
3 months ago it was comfortable, So you really have to prepare your body for this type of season, So just recently I did a talk for the oil and gas industry, and these guys have a big problem with heat stroke.
Oh, I can imagine.
So and they're trying to, with OSHA being super involved, there are some new regulations that they're pushing in just to avoid these problems that they're having, because it's increased substantially. And you got to think of the body as, remember, trillions of cells, right? They're moving around. Your body is mostly made up of water, right? Mm-hmm. So even if you're 3 to 5% dehydrated, your body's not functioning correctly.
Right.
So just think of that, and that's not a lot, and all you got to do is drink some water,
Mm-hmm.
So there are some things that you can do. You can put in some type of Celtic salt. There's a lot of things in the market right now that are have a lot of sodium and magnesium and potassium, things like that help, get the hydration into the cell, because that's the most important part. If you're just guzzling water from time
all
to
you're
time,
doing is just going out.
Yeah,
your body's not retaining it.
Right. So this is just it's consistency. You want to always have a water bottle by you. You're sipping water throughout the day. You should never have a problem with hydration. But once you hit to the point to where your friend hit, that's kind of a dangerous area, because your body's starting to shut down.
Some of the problem he was passing out, and then I think he was in the process of, potentially having kidney failure. Stuff was I don't think he had that underlying issue, but like that was because of his body having all this other stuff.
Yeah.
He was like like, from what the doctors were saying, they were like, your blood pressure was like super low, your heart rate wasn't really there, and he was like, you made a recovery, but there's a high likelihood that you wouldn't have made it, because like your kidneys were in the process of trying to shut down and all that kind of stuff. So
kidney shut down, you're done.
Right. Yeah.
So that could be easily fixed.
Right.
They probably juiced him up with an IV. We were talking about that earlier. IV nutrition is popular now.
Right.
You can still get those things through food and water. You don't have to actually always have an IV. If you want to get a quick fix and you want to stay at your peak performance, IVs are good. There's a lot of good things going on with IVs, but dehydration can be a big problem this time of year. So,
right.
And you were talking earlier, Jason, about just you running and things like that. Again, over time, our body starts to adapt to the temperatures that we've been in. You had mentioned earlier, or you had actually went to the cryotherapy,
right?
You got to remember your body also has this. Almost think of it as like an aqua suit. It's called brown fat. Which brown fat's the good stuff,
right?
So you want brown fat, and what happens is when we're younger, we have a lot of brown fat. That's why when you're young and you don't mind jumping in that pool in the middle of the winter because it just feels good. As we age, we lose brown fat. You're just going to lose it through an aging process. You lose more of it if you like to stay comfortable. So if you're always like really want to stay comfortable, then you're losing brown fat. Okay, so that's why, again, adversity, putting yourself in uncomfortable situations is always going to be a good thing for the body. So you can work on that. Like with running, I have quite a few friends that do running. They do ultra marathons. They run the long stuff. I don't get it, but they love it. I think they just love the runner's high, which is a real thing,
I'm trying to run 50 miles. I just, I can't even imagine that.
I've got a friend that runs. I think his last race was like 150 miles.
Yeah, I know people that do that. Yeah,
but back to what you were saying, Ian, your body can go through so much, so. Back to the running part, Jason, if you're doing some type of hot therapy, like even if your gym offers some type of sauna, if you spend some time in the sauna, you'll start to build up a resilience on that heat. Mm-hmm. And so that 90-degree day that you're going out and running 5K doesn't seem as bad as it did before.
Right.
You just start to build again. Remember, the cells are
you got to subject yourself to it. I know I'm still getting my body used to running because for long we've had some mild temperatures and it's been very it's been pleasant. Wonderful to actually run, and it's we are all talking about it's going to be those heat indexes are going to be over 100 when we run, and so
and we also I never quite realized what this meant. This is kind of a departure, but like the first day of summer, the summer solstice or whatever, being like the longest day of the year.
That's right.
So I didn't know this, but now every day from here on is going to be getting
shorter and shorter.
So this was the peak, which is probably why we're in the hottest time we've been in so far.
The air gets more chance to get warmed up.
Exactly, and then of course now it's going to be getting so. Here's hoping, but here in Louisiana, it's going to bounce around before. So, but anyways.
This is some
interesting stuff.
I was looking at I pulled up this article from the Mayo Clinic. They said that Mayo Clinic said only 2.7% of the U.S. population actually lives a healthy lifestyle.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. And I don't think that that's an accident right now. They've built us this way.
Look of course it is.
Look at the food pyramid. Yeah. They've done this to us. So that's what happened after COVID. I think everybody started waking up and going, whoa, wait a minute. Mm-hmm. Typically you knew one or two people that did not make it through COVID, so that was a pretty big eye opener right there for a lot of people to take things into their own hands. So we are seeing that across the industry, that people are starting to pay attention, and low-hanging fruit right now is the cold therapy, is the hot therapy, so, and those things you can even do at home, so you don't have to have a wellness budget like I try to coach people to have. These are things that people don't think about. We talk about it all the time. You never had that wellness line on your budget. It should be a line now. You should be thinking about spending, shifting that going out to eat money over to maybe something that's going to be good for you. So there are some things that you can do. The sauna's low-hanging fruit. There's tons of studies that have been out with the hot therapy. It's not just a detoxing thing. Mm-hmm. There's a lot more things that happen to the body. It starts to push out. It actually does detox, but think about what that does to the body. We're trying to get this stuff out. You talked about it earlier about sweating. We've got to get the bad stuff out.
Right. You got to sweat.
That? Yeah. So there are a couple of ways to do that through the lymphatic system. Sweating is probably the best way to do it. But if you're not doing anything right now to sweat, you got to figure that out right now, And if you want to get if you want to kill two birds with one stone, go buy you a push lawnmower. That will do it.
Yeah. But be hydrated. Stay hydrated.
Right. Don't drink your water.
Well, you're kind of following up with that. I'm looking at this article here. And they're saying right now Gen Z and millennials are spending a lot more money on wellness than previous generations. So Stoney and and Gen Xers and boomers, we don't spend as much money on wellness.
Well, we didn't have to. We worked our asses off. We were busy. We were hot. We didn't have it. When I was young, we didn't even have air conditioning. We had an attic fan. So, and I'm the end of the boomer generation. I'm the last year of the boomers. So that generation just worked, and they were a bit more healthy, and they weren't eating all these chemicals. And it was the X generation coming in, wanting the chemicals, wanting all of this stuff, and it's destroying our people, and it's killing our people.
Well, Yeah, right now I'm seeing 26% of U.S. consumers are interested in testing for vitamin and mineral deficiencies at home, 24% for cold and flu symptoms, and 23% for cholesterol levels. So,
not good. You know, you were talking about earlier the baby boomers. You know, you guys were kind of like post-war, hardworking, loyal. You know, typically stuck to one job.
Right.
You know, and had good access to food. You know, and we're doing most of the chores yourself outside. You know, so you're right. Your health is better. The Generation X, Jason and I, we're a little bit different. These are just a couple of things I was thinking about the other day. You know, or at least I know, seem to be a little bit more independent, and I speculate on a lot of things. You know, so I like to learn more about what's coming down the pipeline. Now, Ian, your generation, a little different. You know,
Right.
You guys grew up with electronics. You know, you didn't necessarily have to be outside as much.
Yeah, I was. It's so strange. I was born in the mid '90s, and so I was on the tail end of what you guys are talking about, and then this new generation. I feel squarely in the middle of I remember growing up and not having, a cell phone or having a game console in the living room, but more often than not, used to go skateboard and bike ride with my friends outside, same sort of thing. Whenever the lights come on, you had to be home for dinner, like that kind of stuff. But then as I grew up, that definitely shifted, and even people that were born 4 or 5 years after me, very different in how the world worked. Everything, 9/11 changed a lot about, I think, how we, how we saw certain things, and how we, very. A big thing I remember growing up, the whole stranger danger thing was a big thing as well, and keeping it all closed off and all that kind of stuff. And so it's very interesting I remember whenever cell phones weren't really a thing, but then I also remember whenever my friends got the first smartphones, and so it's just this weird middle ground where I feel like I've gotten to learn technology as it's grown and evolved, and now I feel like I'm, in so many ways, have removed myself from some of when social media was nothing, and now it's this, multi-billion-dollar industry. And I remember growing up, learning about social media and being in that space and learning about all that kind of stuff and feeling like it was a whole new place. And now I've really gotten away from all of it because it wasn't good for my mental health. So It's interesting how, Whereas younger people than myself, like my brother was also kind of in that. My youngest brother was born, 98. And I think anybody born in the 2000s kind of sings a different song than I do about, being raised around technology and all that kind of stuff.
Well, and you know what? And part of the conversation today, mental health is part of wellness.
Yeah.
It's very important, and a lot of the things Troy has talked about is these things change your brain and let your body pharmacy go to work and dump the correct drugs in that it's natural drugs that it's supposed to. And so, and we spent last month on mental health for Mental Health Month, and it is part of wellness. How we are struggling or occupying the day is very, very important.
Right. I realized firsthand whenever I sat down and was really honest with myself. I was like, the amount of time that I'm spending on social media and what gratification I am getting from it wasn't satisfying me in the way that I feel like it did once upon a time. And I feel like it was a place where it was a digital community where I could be involved with my friends, and I could stay connected with them. And in recent years, every time I had logged on to it, it seemed like it was just another method to advertise things to me and spread a lot of just not healthy emotions. And I was like, I think I want to cut this out of my life. And then I did and was like, okay, yeah, I'm definitely a lot clearer minded, and I don't think I'm not as sad about the world as I used to be, that kind of stuff. So
right, yeah, and I think that they relate a lot of that towards the generational movement. You know, your brother, who's your younger brother.
Yeah.
You know, he was kind of that native technology guy.
Right,
You know,
right.
Those guys grew up with phones in their hand. And if you just watch the progressive movement, is like when, you know, from the house phone to the pager to the cell phone.
I had dial-up internet where I had to ask my mom if she was expecting any phone calls before I hopped on the internet because it was going to cut the phone line.
Well, as I said, I think those age categories, depending on where you fall within those age, it depends. Because just like I said, I've said older Gen Xers probably identify more toward the boomer side than maybe later Gen Xers.
Right.
And just like the same with older millennials versus newer millennials.
I'm technically a younger millennial in the grand scheme of things.
And you could even say with boomers.
Right,
Older boomers versus a younger boomer.
Right.
Probably quite different in how they view the world and how they go about doing their business.
This is all just a rough categorization.
These are rough categories, so there's always kind of nuances within those. So
it's interesting. And it's strange, but yeah, I don't know. I've taken, like I said, some liberties in my own hands as far as like, you know, my own wellness and my own things that I feel like I've, you know, my dad being a paramedic and also my youngest brother being a paramedic as well. Like I've learned a whole lot from like by proxy through them, you know, how they operate and live their lives and things like that. And so I feel like I've always been questioning that kind of stuff. And so,
you know, I'm looking at, this is a pretty neat article on wellness trends, you know, going into the future. And they say right now, U.S. consumers seek out clinically proven products across most product categories. So,
and I think that ties into what I was talking about a little bit before of like
people are wanting kind of data behind your claim. If you say this, do you have some data to back that up?
I would like, it's so hard because I would like the best of both worlds. I want to find some natural remedy. I want to find something that's good and holistic. But like I said before, more often than not, people are trying to make a quick buck and they're trying to sell a product. And a lot of times it's not FDA certified because, again, it's not in that realm, or it's some sort of supplement or whatever you want to consider it as. And so like I want something that's going to be scientifically tested and backed, and you know, so I'm not just, you know, putting something in my body that
you take any risk, anything that says that's you know, it's not been tested by the FDA.
Right.
I mean,
but then we learned after COVID with the vaccines, even if the FDA puts their stamp on it, maybe that's not such a good thing anyway.
We needed an episode on the FDA and the AMA. That would be a good one. There's a lot of good information out there on that.
Yeah. So,
Ian, are you looking for like a product you're saying, or you're just going back to like?
No, I think I'm speaking kind of generally, like, you know, is that I want to steer clear of a lot of medications. I don't want to have to be dependent on medications if I don't have to be, and so I feel like I'm in this. You know, there's been multiple times where there's been a supplement or there's been something that I feel like I can take that has helped out with the situation, and sometimes in that. Because the supplement industry is not really FDA certified a lot of times. It kind of I found myself doing more research because I'm like, I don't want to take something that is, you know, is going to potentially harm me in the future or something like that. Sure. So a lot of times if something does have a sealed approval or it does have like some, you know, clinical trials or you know, people of science or doctors that can back it up and go like, this is a pretty good thing. I've realized that to kind of to reinforce what Jason was reading is that sometimes I do look for something that has a little bit of credibility to it,
right?
You know, you know.
Yeah.
Well, I think I wonder, you know, hearing us talk about this, I wonder if maybe COVID didn't have a little unintended backlash on the government, on Big Farm, on the ADA, the FDA. All of this is because you're listening to more and more people making their own bread. You're listening to more and more people doing a little more healthy stuff. You're listening to more people putting gardens and having their own chickens and doing certain things to take control of their life because, you know, you can't count on these other things that we've counted on for a couple of generations. And so people are what if that was an unintentional backlash of
it
overreach by our government and things like that?
I think it definitely shook some trust there.
When you can't get toilet paper, or you can't get the food on the shelf that you thought you're going to figure other ways out. And now it seems like the Americans, maybe that pendulum is swinging that we talked about earlier in that direction because of the restrictions that we had before. I wonder if we're not going back to a more healthy swing now because of that.
I think it's definitely being looked at a lot more. Let's just say that, and we got to remember, think about this. The deeper you look into this, but your body is a pharmacy, so what are you looking for? What are you looking to do?
Shortcuts, easy way out.
But this has to be more of a lifestyle shift. It can't be like, I'm going to take that for a little while and see what happens.
Right.
This goes back to the dentist conversation. How many teeth do I want to keep?
Right.
I keep all my teeth. So I'm flossing regularly. I'm brushing my teeth every day, just like everybody else is doing. What are some habits that you can put in place on a daily basis to help you sustain that lifestyle over time? And that's really what you're looking for. You don't want to be halfway in, halfway out, because if you're halfway in, halfway out, you're out. You're not even in it.
Right.
So you have to implement some things on a regular basis. And if you could do some things daily, awesome. You know that you're going to build a great habit there. And, and again, I keep going back to these things because these things are low-hanging fruit, but when you're putting your body under pressure, under stress. I mean, everybody's doing the cold plunge now. I love the cold plunge. I've recently invested in a company that's doing cold plunging on a big level. So I'm fired up about that. I've recently got connected with companies that do saunas at home and do it affordable, or they could do it to the luxury saunas, So those are the things that I believe in, because I think that your body, if you can get your body to react in a positive direction, then you're not worried about Big Pharma as much, because you're not having to visit their door that often. You're not asking them for permission to take their things.
Well, you're not as sick. And what is their motto? A cured patient is a lost customer.
Right.
So if you're not as sick and going to them for so many things, you're really taking care and taking control of your own situation and not being relying on someone keeping you sick to make money off of you.
Right. So, and John, I know John had mentioned on one of the episodes earlier that he had started working out, and I thought that was kind of cool, because I really think that everybody should be doing some type of physical activity, because it's like flossing. Okay, so if you're not flossing, what's going to happen if you don't floss over time? Some teeth are going to start to drop out for sure. You got to start looking at exercise, and it doesn't have to be anything strenuous, but you got to have to start looking at that as something you have to do daily. And these things could be done in 10-minute increments. They could be done in an hour. But it just has to be done daily. This was something that I thought was interesting, but when you're working out the muscles, they start to secrete hormones. So just doing weight routines is like pushing hormones into your body, So we talked about the runner's high earlier. It's a real thing, and what's happening is they're exercising. So what's the body do? It puts them kind of in a state of mind to where they feel like they're enjoying this shit, And let's face, I'm a runner, I like to run, but who really likes to run? It's not. I like to do it because it's my time, and for me, my time is important, and I kind of get in my head a little bit, and hush the noise, if you will.
Yeah.
And I enjoy that because we really hadn't even talked about peace. And I know that we were going to talk about that, but really all of this, is part of the puzzle to peace. If you're starting to implement these things are a little bit harder on you, hard to make decisions, you get peace. Peace is the answer.
And maybe what we can do is a part 2 to this.
Yeah.
Maybe we can do part 2
Yeah,
peace, wellness,
we could
and
just
peace,
do a
and
whole
get
peace.
you back in a couple weeks,
Yeah.
and we'll do one on peace, because you and I are actually listening to a book right now that's extremely fascinating on some of these subjects, and maybe if you're inclined, you come back for part 2 on wellness and peace, and that would be fun. I think there's a lot of stuff out there. I want to tell you a joke before my accident that I've told a number of times on the podcast is that, and I haven't been able to use it lately, but I'm going to say it for you, is I went running the other day, but after 2 minutes I had to stop because I forgot something.
I think
I forgot that I was old and fat and can't run. So.
I think Maine. I think I saw some stats about peace. Maine is the most peaceful state. You know who's the least? Louisiana.
Get out.
Yep.
Really?
Yep.
That actually, I can see the main thing, but I can't really see.
And Latin American countries dominate the always at peace lists.
Well, they got siestas.
Yeah.
They sleep in the hot part of the day. They take a break.
Yeah, so it's something
I
we
didn't
can
figure Louisiana would be the least peaceful state in the Union. Huh.
That's wild. We're always at the bottom.
And there's
of the
something
list.
about those siestas. There's been studies out on naps and how important they are. If you can get
Einstein lived on 2 hours of sleep, but 15-minute naps an hour.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, there've been some studies, recently that 2 naps a week will help you decrease cardiovascular problems in the future by 30-40%.
I think that generally sleep fixes a lot of problems, and I think that at least in
that's
in
when the body heals.
In the
body
circles
heals
that the circles that I run in, a lot of times people have very poor sleep schedules from what I've experienced. So that's been very interesting to think about that.
And that adds up. It compounds
Yep.
over time.
Yep,
and it's not. And we talking about mental health.
Yep.
You
I've heard sleep debt is a big thing. So,
and that's not something you can get back.
Right.
Once you lose it, you can't sleep more to get it back. Now you can start something for the future,
right?
But you can't get the sleep back you lost. That's the problem.
Yeah.
So wow.
Very interesting subject matter, and I am excited for us to potentially come back around to do a part 2 on, to expand more about this. But thank you for coming out and doing this episode with us. I really appreciate it.
It's been fun.
Yeah. For any of you, if anybody out there who wants to try and get in contact with us, we have a Facebook page /Retrospect Pod where you can reach out to us there, as well as a YouTube channel. Same thing at Retrospect Pod where you can give us little comments here and there and like the videos. Or if you have more long form responses you want to give us, we have an email address, getoffendedtogether@gmail.com, where you can give us those kind of suggestions or comments there.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys, and I'm really looking forward if we can come back and discuss more.
No, there's no if to that. That's just whenever your schedule allows it, we'll have you back.
Yeah. And if I could say one thing, I think, just from what I've taken from this good conversation is, and I've really had to do a deep dive. I think everybody's kind of looking for this life lottery ticket, like, when's my ticket coming up? When am I going to feel better? And I think people are starting to take that journey into their own hands, and writing it out and being consistent with what that looks like in time. And, that's the only thing, if I could leave that with anybody listening, the audience listening, is just to really kind of plan out, where do you want to be at my age, at 55, 65, 75? It's like a retirement plan. You have to plan for it. You can't wait to the end. So, if just to hope somebody gets something out of this and they could make some changes, and that would be real cool.
But until next week, thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.
Goodbye, everyone. God bless.
Guys, thanks for listening to us today and hanging out with us. And you are the best. Peace.